I'm live. Hello. It's Saturday evening and it is the 5th of September 2020 and I am continuing chapter 7 of the book Prelude to the Landing on Planet Earth, written by Stuart Holroyd, and I have been uploading on YouTube and Vimeo chapters 6 up to 6 and the first part of chapter 7, which I ended yesterday. It's a very interesting journey, and I'm going to share the continued chapter 7 entitled Revelations. The last chapter was, concluding the session, Tom said, "We have begun a new time in your land and your universe, and it is a time for you to drop and to remove the string that attaches you to the past time in the physical, and to remove also your doubt. We ask this of you, and we know that it is much, and we know that it is difficult for you to prove what you say to those around you. But it is not necessary, for the proof will come in time. In this world in which you exist, they use a term, happy of your new year. We wish to say to you, happy of your new universe." This was December 1974. As if in response to the call of the new time, during January and February 1975, contacts were established with old associates, and there was a continual flow of visitors to Ossining, including Bobby, Lyle Watson, Dr. Neil Hitchen, and Jim Woodtuck. On the 19th January, I paid the visit described in the first chapter of this book, which the reader may refer back to for an impression of what daily life in the community was like at this time. It is very much an outsider's impression though, and since writing it I have listened to the tapes and talked to the people involved and got a clearer picture of the interpersonal conflicts and underlying tension of the time. In this narrative I've had to focus on Phyllis, Andrija and John, and have only been able to mention very briefly relationships they had each outside the trio. Nor have I been able to make more than a passing mention of the fact that when he was at home in Ossining, Andrija sometimes held communications through other psychics. In order to preserve the anonymity of certain of these, when we speak of Colette in the rest of this narrative, the reader should understand that the name is used for more than one person. The first communication that Colette participated in is interesting both for its content and for the fact that it was the only communication of this period that was terminated abruptly, allegedly because of the activities of the opposition. Tom chose this occasion to address the group on the subject of spurious physical and spiritual experience, and the different orders of non-physical existence. We know that what you have done in faith, he began. We have asked you to understand that the nature of the project will take from all three of you great energy. You will also recall that those that opposite have not finished opposing. Now, we wish you to understand clearly that what we ask, we are asking from a universal point, and not from an earthly or a spirit point. There are many things in which you on the planet Earth are involved that in truth do not have the nature of the universe, but only of the planet Earth or of the spirit planets that surround the planet Earth. And you have the belief that this is a way of attaining what you call the spiritual. There are many processes in which you are involved, which are a waste of time, and which also create a problem, because you believe that this is the path on which you must go. We wish you to know that when a physical body is ill, the person often has what is called a spiritual experience. Do you understand why this is so? Andrija said, "It is because the so-called separation of the spirit from the body occurs." Tom said, "It is in a sense what that But what happens is that when the physical body is ill, not all the vital organs operate upon the proper vitality rate in order for the physical body to function properly. This in turn gives the feeling to the physical being that they are having a spiritual experience. It is simply because they are between two worlds. They are closer then to the spirit world than they are to the physical world. Andrija asked, "Is that what we call the astral?" Tom explained, "There are different planes of existence in the spirit world, but it is not a universal world. Each planetary civilization has in its midst or around it a spirit plane or numerous spirit planes, and there are within the physical planet Earth many forms of communication with different levels within the spirit planes. There's a difference between what the being, Phyllis, calls intelligence, and we have asked you to call aeons and those of the spirit planes. We wish you to understand clearly with whom you are dealing." Colette asked, "Do you wish me to end communications with the astral plane?" "It serves no purpose except to drive you into its pits," Tom answered. Then, returning to the subject of spurious spiritual experience, he went on. "And it is also come into the minds of physical beings that they could perhaps bring to themselves the experience of spiritual awareness by the intake in their bodies of substances that would bring them to this awareness. The reason that the intake of what you would call drugs gave them the sense that they had become spiritually aware was simply because they affected the vital organs and brought them, in fact, closer to death. So therefore, they would be between the spiritual and the physical. But if you operate on an automobile on inferior oil, how long will it work without being clogged?" A number of other topics were raised and discussed in this communication before Tom interrupted a question of Andrija to say, "We are having difficulty." Suddenly Phyllis came out of trance. "How can they do that?" she said when she got her bearings. "How can they bring me out so quickly?" John said he supposed they could do anything when they had to, but the question was, why had they had to? There was only one way to find out, so after a pause, Phyllis went back into trance and Andrija asked Tom for an explanation of what had happened. He explained that the opposition had suddenly launched an attack of intensified vigor, and all energy resources had been required to combat it, leaving none for continuation of the communication. The battle was still in progress, he said, so it would be better if they stopped again and met later in the day for further discussion. When they met again just before midnight, Colette was not a participant, and Tom was able to explain more fully the cause of the earlier difficulty. The trouble arose because of the lady. There was within the lady a problem of ego. She does not mean to be of that nature, but there is a weakness in her, and as you have learned, all weaknesses can be used. This does not mean that she is not to work and to serve, but it is only for you to understand that physical beings have these weaknesses, which you must have the wisdom to discern. Do you understand? Andrija said, "Yes, I understand about the lady, but I don't understand how it relates to the opposition." Tom, when there exists a problem within a physical being, and they are within your box, that energy may be used. We are only telling you this out of love for you and the lady. There is within her, as there was within all three of you at one time, a great deal that needs to be purified, and you do not have the time, so she must do her own perfecting. It is important for both of you to be aware of those that are involved in what you call the psychic field. It is a new field for Sir John, but our doctor knows it well. But there is one thing within him which he is aware of but does not attend to. Of all the beings and species that exist on the planet Earth, those that are involved in what you would call psychic work have great difficulty with the ego. It is important for you, and we know not how to say this to you, but beware of your weaknesses and be careful of your traps, and do not permit yourself to be used to perpetuate the ego of those that are psychic. Your weakness, Doctor, has been sirens. It is an element in your nature that needs to be controlled. We ask you in the future, on meeting a siren, to stand back and be objective. Do not bring those with whom that you have a personal relationship into the work. It cannot be. They will use you. Andrija did not at the time react to this advice and view of the situation, but apparently acquiesced to it. But in a later discussion with John and Phyllis, he said that there were times when he disagreed with the nine. When they spoke from their universal point of view, they were no doubt infallible. But with regard to the physical, he believed that they could sometimes be wrong, for on their own admission, they did not fully understand physical life and its problems. John and Phyllis both felt that he was rationalizing an unwillingness to acknowledge what they both considered a very relevant warning, and there followed a discussion in which they each expressed quite frankly their views of problems with the other two. The idea behind the discussion was to clear out, as John said, anything that has an energy in it that can disrupt the work. And over a period of a couple of hours, there was certainly a great deal of energy discharged, though the problems were not, as John hoped, once and for all disposed of. Since the psychology of the three and of the relationships between them may be relevant to the question of the nature and origin of the communications, I have judged that to report this personal material can be construed neither as an unwarranted infringement of privacy, nor as a gingering up of the narrative with spicy revelations. He who seeks the psychological explanation of the phenomenon of the communications may find here to this purpose, and for other readers, the spectacle of the three laundering their dirty linen may serve to counteract the uncomfortable implications of the elitism that have emerged in earlier chapters. The discussions developed out of a report Phyllis gave the other two of an experience she had had that morning during her session on the electronic equipment, which is why it was recorded. She had fallen into trance and been taken out of the body to appear before the nine, where she had been given a lecture and instructed to report it to the other two. The nine had told her that they must have the triangle in perfect balance for their work, and that at present they were not balanced, for each had an ego problem that they were not aware of, and that could ruin all their work and plans. They had stressed, Phyllis said, that the three were physical beings and were not different from or better than others on the planet, and that if they didn't understand that they wouldn't be able to function. They had analyzed the faults of each of them, and told Phyllis that she must convey this part of the message quite clearly. She didn't know how she could, though, because some of the things they had said were so personal. John said that she must come out with it, for he and Andrija wouldn't hold her responsible for what the nine had said, and he personally had no doubt that at this time she was functioning as spokesman for the nine. Andrija agreed. Phyllis said she knew she had to do it, but it wasn't going to be easy. So perhaps she could start with what they had said about herself. They had told her that she was too emotional in relating what they had said and what she felt to the others, and that the reason for her excessive emotionality was a lack of confidence and a tendency to doubt. As regards John, they had said that he was sometimes like a spoiled child. that he was given to unreasonable resentments, was prone to self-pity, and that in everything he did, he tried too hard. Both John and Andrija, they had said, sometimes misinterpreted what was said in the communications and made them mean what they had wanted them to mean. But they had wanted them to mean. But it was what they had said about Andrija that she found most difficult to relate. They had said that he had not really mastered his emotions, though he thought he had, and that made him susceptible to the manipulations of sirens. In conclusion, they had stressed again that the energy of the three was vital, and that if their mission failed, the consequences for the earth would be dire, and they would be entirely responsible. Andrija was apparently moved by Phyllis's account and at first showed no resentment about what had been said about himself, nor any doubt that the strictures and advice that Phyllis reported emanated from the Nine. He said, "Let's recognize that there is an outside world that presses upon us, and let's make a pledge to each other never to let any outside thing get inside the group and disrupt the work. I'm prepared to make that pledge right now." Phyllis said, "Right." They said that unless we are in harmony, we can't do anything. Andrija said, "So we must recognize where the disharmony comes from and help each other understand and deal with it." So they agreed, as they had done before, to be more up to front with each other in future, not to hide their feelings or thoughts, to talk frankly about any problems that could cause disharmony, to be willing, each of them, to accept criticism from the other two and to put before all other considerations the maintenance of the harmonious balance of the triangle. John said that he acknowledged that the management were right about him and that the problem he needed help with was the problem of his intensity. "Sure," Andrija said, "your adrenaline system is just hyperactive. You've trained yourself all your life to be competitive, aggressive, a sportsman, all that stuff, and you can't rid of it that easily. You could ask a tranquilizer and you wouldn't be so you could take a tranquilizer and you wouldn't be so hyperactive. And Phyllis should go to a gynecologist and get her menopausal problems under control." "Andrija, I went through a hysterectomy 3 years ago," Phyllis protested. "I know," Andrija said, "and you are still in menopause. You're still in menopause, kid. You think it ends with a hysterectomy? There's definitely problems that we should be realistic about. There's no shame, there's nothing. It's just a problem. And I'm speaking as a physician. We have to take into account the biochemistry of the body. We should look at that very carefully, and it shouldn't give rise to any more emotions than looking into the functioning of the machine world." They discussed at some length problems of decision-making, both in the context of their work and in the context of their community life, and agreed that everything the Nine asked of them should be discussed and agreed upon unanimously before any action was taken, but that they might each act on their own initiative regarding minor decisions. It was at this point that Andrija said he retained the right to disagree with the Nine about physical matters that they had admitted they knew little about. Then Phyllis brought up a problem of hers for discussion. She said she sometimes got a strong feeling that she should say something that had a bearing on their work or their safety, but she got so afraid that they would misunderstand that she avoided saying anything at all. "For instance," she said, "I have to talk to Andrija about something right now, and I want him to understand that I do it because I'm fearful about what could happen if I didn't." Andrija said, "We have to understand each other's personality, and one thing you must know about me is that it's no good trying to impress me with the consequences of anything. If, like that time in Israel, you get the impression that there's going to be a blowout in front real, just say so in a matter-of-fact way, and don't scream out as you did in a panic and say that it's going to kill me. That's what I resent, because that's laying a trip on me that I don't believe in. I don't believe in fear of death. Okay, I dig that, Andrija, Phyllis said. You have to remember you are dealing with two very unusual people in John and me. We both, I guess, love to play games with death. That's why we've done some of the stupid things we've done in life. Andrija, it's our nature. We're not that type. We know that. So there's a huge imbalance in our perspectives. Andrija, hey, on life, on death, on safety. Wow, you didn't even hear what I said. Let me try to meditate a bit, John said. And he tried to explain to Phyllis that what Andrija was saying was that he had no problem with the content of the messages Phyllis brought across. But what created the problem was the emotional way she expressed things. As I understand it, he said, you get a message from the management from time to time which you need to pass on to us. What we are saying is that if you put it in a calm way, then we feel absolutely cool about it and there's no problem. But none of this has anything to do with what I wanted to talk to Andrija about, Phyllis said. You're both browbeating me. Oh, come on, Phyllis, said Andrija, browbeating. You use such heavy words. Just let me finish, okay? Okay, but choose your words more carefully, please. I know you have no fear, Andrija, but that's not what I was talking about. We were talking about predictions, Andrija explained, and the way predictions are loaded with fears of consequences. Were we? I thought I was talking about a problem I'm having, and I'm asking your help with it. So let's come back to what you wanted to say to Andrija, John said. Phyllis was silent for some time, and then she said, we'll finish the conversation another time. Phyllis, you mustn't get emotional about anything we say. That's the first thing you must learn. Oh God, please. I know that, Andrija. You're being emotional right now, and you must stop and say, Phyllis. Phyllis, I'm not being emotional. Phyllis shouted, I know it. Okay, then stop it, baby, Andrija shouted back, but with a laugh. What makes me so goddamn mad is that you two don't listen half the time, Phyllis said. I'm listening to every word, but you don't use words very carefully. You don't realize how loaded some of your words are. I am a very sensitive person to words. And I am a very sensitive person to feelings, Phyllis flashed back. John tried to meditate again and eventually succeeded in coaxing Phyllis to mediate again. John tried to mediate again and eventually succeeded in coaxing Phyllis to say what she wanted to say to Andrija. It turned out to be that Colette had taken her aside and told her that she had come to Ossining to take care of Andrija's needs. That she had a personal relationship with him and that she wasn't going to stand any interference from Phyllis. I didn't know what to say at the time, Phyllis went on. Andrija, you know there's never been anything between you and me, so I don't understand somebody talking to me like that. Well, I don't even want to discuss it because it's in the area of competition between women and total irrationality, Andrija said. John didn't agree with him. He said he knew Colette had spoken to all of the other women in the house in the same terms, and that because what she had said had been hurtful to Phyllis, and this couldn't be lightly dismissed. Phyllis said she wasn't so much concerned about the personal hurt as about Colette's interfering in the work, because another thing she had said, Phyllis, was that she knew about the work and was part of it. And John reminded Andrija that they had a warning about a siren. Look, I'm not involved, Andrija protested. That warning was that this siren was going to take me over, right? Well, I tell you, forget it. It's a joke. It's just a case of jealousy between women. Oh, Jesus Christ, I'm not jealous of her, Phyllis shouted. Then you wouldn't have brought it up, Andrija said. Gently but emphatically, John said, Andrija, it's not such a joke if there has been a warning about a siren. The management do have a thing about you not getting involved with a siren. Well, how about yourself? Andrija retaliated, and the subsequent discussion must have become even more personal and recriminatory because the recording ends abruptly at this point. And I shall end at this point too, on page 239 of Revelations, chapter 7, and I continue with chapter 7, but part 3, when it is a little bit lighter, because it's getting very dark, and it is Saturday evening. Goodbye.